from the world of communication, I would like to use a couple of examples of illustrating what Albert explained as the way that we construct a reality that is not necessarily like reality, or sometimes even the opposite to reality. I will use both communication through normal media, who are mainly motivated by political forces, and they sell their media by giving dramatic news that excite people's feelings and make them buy and watch news. Then you have the world of entertainment and sports, where you don't glorify so much failures, but you glorify success. And therefore it's a much more positive approach. It's very difficult to glorify success in your daily media. It doesn't sell. But in sports, it is exactly what sells. And therefore it creates a completely different momentum. The commercial world has understood very well how to use that, and I'm not generalizing, because obviously only the most successful companies that have used sponsorship in order to create a positive image for their brand have succeeded. But there are some effects that I think might actually have been completely unintentional, that have been driven and created a new reality around an issue such as racism, for instance, in the United States. And that is how professional sports evolved in the United States, with the NFL, the NBA, and baseball, where, and I won't go through the history of how that happened, however, there has been an enormous number of African Americans who have succeeded beyond all imagination in these sports. And just if you take the NBA, you think of Magic Johnson, or Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, etc. And they have managed to create an opposite reality on the question of racism in the United States, contrary to the one that was created by the political forces and also the media. And you were explaining, for instance, how they were artificially changing the perception of the black community by subjecting them to tests that were not adapted to their culture, which is just being unfair. Whereas in sports, they had a fair field, and they were, judged upon their visible performances. And suddenly you have lots of young Americans that think, wow, he's cool, he's exceptional, I admire him, I put a poster of him in my room, etc. Something that would never have happened, if you think about it, before the 1950s or even 60s, when this phenomenon started. Would have been unthinkable for a young American to idolize a black athlete or musician, for instance, of whom we have had many also black, who have become legendary. So that is one way in which you can completely depoliticize the racial issue by taking them out of that domain and judge these people in a completely different set of values. And I think that is obviously the issue of racism is far from being solved in the States. However, I think we would not have been it would not have come as far as it has come today in relation to the 50s, had it not been for music and sports and other entertainment. And I will come back to that kind of discussion tomorrow in my presentation about analogies and metaphors. The other one I wanted to point to is that there is a theory in explaining the success of sponsorship. Sponsorship is effectively a tool for commercial brands in order to change the reality of the consumer, or how the consumer views his products or services. And one of the reasons we believe that sponsorship is so much more successful at changing people's attitudes towards brands is because it completely changes the relationship between the consumer and that product or that company even. Let's step back, and our relationship to the corporate world is one of suspicion. It's impenetrable. It's a mysterious world. We don't know much about them. The CEO is an old guy who looks wise, but we never really sort of interact with him in any way. We are suspicious of them because everything they tell us, we know is paid for. It's advertising in journals, etc. Therefore, we know that we have a very one-sided description of the company and their products. So we are very resistant. We have, as you said yesterday, closure to advertising messages. We are basically suspicious of everything the corporate world tries to tell us. So what happens when the corporate world then decides, okay, let's advertise our brand by going into sports or other entertainment, but sport is the most powerful one. What happens is that you are perceived, and it is a perception because it's obviously not true, but you are perceived to be willing to risk your brand by entering into the arena and actually risk humiliation by a competitive brand that might beat you on the football field, or beat you on a circuit, or beat you in any kind of sports event. And that gives the consumer, again, a perception of that brand being, first of all, courageous and confident of its quality and courage and values to actually do this, to subject this brand to this very public display, which may go well by winning and being glorified, etc., or being humiliated. And that means that your perception to the brand is one of much more easily that way you reach admiration for the brand. You eliminate the suspicion because the appearance is, this is something that I can actually observe and I can see it with my own eyes. I can see what happens. I can see who is good and who is bad, meaning that's obviously analogous for winning and losing. We believe that is one of the biggest factors for the success of sponsorship. It creates a completely new reality. And of course, it would be much more objective to actually look at what this corporate unit is producing, how it is producing it, and so forth. But we prefer a heuristic shortcut of just looking at how they perform in sports, or music, or cinema, etc. So does that correspond a little bit to the construction of reality? It's an artificial reconstruction of reality, which is incredibly efficient because of the emotional way that people judge the reality that they can observe.
Thank you.